perception, it may be differ from one individual to other individual, as well as, so what we perceive, it may be differ from objective reality. Perception plays a vital role in the organization. So the organization has to manage with the individual perception, and you need to analyze the individual perception. In this situation, personal insecurity leads to judge an individual or to find mistakes in their action. So that is motive. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to one and all to the first session on organizational behavior. In the last session, we finished with the foundations of individual behavior. In today's session, let us start with the unit 3, that is perception and emotion. I am Meghana from the Department of Commerce, lecturing in Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence. In today's session, let us discuss with the perception. Introduction, perception, importance, characteristics, barriers and principles of perceptual organization. So perception. So perception and emotion are two separate concepts. Let us take perception first. So perception is the process by which individuals organize and interpret their impression in order to give meaning to their environment. It's a process of analyzing, interpreting and giving meaning to the surrounding. So giving meaning to their environment or their surrounding. So here what we perceive can be substantially different from objective reality. So perception, it may be differ from one individual to other individual, as well as, so what we perceive, it may be differ from objective reality. So it based on individual psychology and their intellectual ability to perceive about the object or an individual. So perception means perceiving, that is giving meaning to the environment surround us. So we need to analyze, we need to interpret and give meaning for object. If we consider this pen, so first we need to analyze, interpret and give meaning for this object. So what is the benefit? So how we can use? So based on individual intellectual ability and psychological process, we are going to give meaning for this object. So that is perception. So it can be defined as a process which involves seeing, receiving, selecting, organizing, interpreting and giving meaning to the environment. First we need to see, then we receive something, then we need to select, need to organize and interpret, then give meaning for that particular object or situation. So it's a process of seeing, selecting, organizing, interpreting and giving meaning for the particular object or for the situation. So perception is intellectual and psychological process which is subjective, as individuals perceive similar incident differently. So as I told you, perception is based on the intellectual ability. So based on individual intellectual ability as well as the psychological process, so that the perception may be differ from one individual to other individual. So the same object, it can be perceived in a different way. So based on individual psychological process as well as their intellectual ability, so the perception is different. For example, purchasing a textbook for the students. So the individual, so based on the individual intellectual and psychological ability, they perceive in a different way. So the one may think that it is useful for their studies. So the other individual may perceive that it's a waste of money, or anyhow the faculty is going to give the note, so that it is waste of money to purchase the textbook. So it is based on individual psychological process as well as the intellectual ability. In a similar way, in the organization, for any object or for any situation, so how you analyze, interpret and giving meaning for your object or your surrounding environment. So that is perception. So how we are going to look into the object or situation. So that is perception. So moving further, what are the importance of perception? Perception plays a vital role in the organization because it influences the following. So the perception influence all this process. So first one, your perception will influence interpersonal work relationship. How? So your perception, that means how you judge an individual, that means your subordinate, your worker or your colleague. So how you treat them will influence. So your perception will influence on the coordination or cooperation between your employee. So it influences on the interpersonal work relationship. So how you judge and interpret the object or that situation will influence your working way or working conditions. So it influences your efficiency as well as the coordination. So that influence interpersonal work relationship. So next one, selection of employees. Selection of employees. So perception influence on selecting the employee, right candidate for the right job. So for example, if the HR manager who is interviewing a candidate for the marketing department, so his perception, how he judged the object or how he judged the thing is that only the male candidate will suit for the marketing department. So that is the HR manager perception. So this perception will influence on this selection process. So female candidate may be a good candidate than the male candidate, but the manager perception influence on the selection process. So now the manager think that only the male candidate will fit for this particular job. So he concentrate on male candidates. So he ignores or he will not consider the quality or experience of the female candidate. So it influence on the selection of employees. So next one, performance appraisal. So in a similar way, your perception towards individual. If you have a good opinion about the individual or subordinate, performance appraisal. So you will appraise their performance in a positive way. So you will give a good feedback for the individual. So if it is a negative, you will find out the mistake in every action. So your perception will influence on all these factors. So the perception plays a vital role in the organization. So the organization has to manage with the individual perception and you need to analyze the individual perception. So moving further, the nature of perception. So perception is an intellectual process. So it's all about your mindset and your psychological process. So perception is a psychological process. So according to your psychological process, you're going to react, you're going to give meaning for this environment or external source or for the object. So it's an intellectual process and psychological process. Perception becomes subjective process and different people may perceive the same event differently. For example, in the organization, if the manager scold the subordinates or the team member, so the number of employee may perceive in a different way. So they may perceive that situation. It's a caution for us. Next time the manager will scold us also. So that we need to take care about their activity or their performance. So the other individual may perceive the same situation. So it's only for that particular team member, only for himself, only for the individual. It is nowhere related to us or our performance. Same event can be perceived in a different way based on their ability and psychological process. So these all are the nature of perception. Moving further, factors influencing perception. So what are the factors which influence the perception? So under that first one is a perceiver. So here the perceiver who perceive the object or perceive the event based on their ability and psychological process, it influences. So either it may be a positive or it may be a negative or it may be in a different way. So based on individual perceiver, the object may be differ. So next one, the object or target being perceived. So what is the object or the target will influence on the perceiver or perception. So last one, in the context of the situation which the perception is made. So the situation will influence on the perception process. So first one is perceiver. So next one is target or object. So what is the event or the object that should be perceived? So based on that, it will influence. So next one, situation. In which context you are going to perceive the event or object. So based on that, the perception is going to differ or it going to influence. So let us discuss one by one the characteristics of perception. So under that, first one is a characteristics of perceiver. The perception will influence by the perceiver. So what are the characteristics of perceiver? So first one, individual attitude. So individual attitude will influence on the perception. So for example, in the organization, if you are interviewing for an important position, so the manager or the organization, they think that only the male candidate will suit for this post because it requires some bargaining ability. So he thinks that only the male candidate can manage with the supplier. So that is external source. Female candidate cannot manage with the supplier or external source. So that if any female candidates apply for the job or if she attends the interview, the organization, they won't accept their application or they won't consider the candidates. So they concentrate only on the male candidates. So that is attitude of the interviewer. So your perception or the perceiver attitude is only the male candidate will fit for this particular job or particular position. So that is individual attitude, that is perceiver attitude. So next one, moods. So perceiver mood. If perceiver in a good mood, then you will perceive all the things in a positive way. So you will find all the positive opinion from the event or the object. You will get only the good thing in the object or event. So if it is in a bad mood, so you will find out the mistakes only. So your reaction will be negative. So it's vice versa. So if it is a good mood and a bad mood, it difference or it influence on the perception. So you will find only the good thing or the positive thing if you are in a good mood. Find the mistakes if you are in a negative mood. So in a similar way, your reaction also will be in a similar way. So that is perceiver mood. So then motives. Unsatisfied desires will lead to this motives. For example, for the team leader, if his subordinates work effectively, so it creates an insecurity for the team leader. So personal insecurity will lead to interpret or it will lead to a negative reaction for their subordinates. So personal insecurity will lead or unsatisfied desire, that is motives, will lead to negative impact on the organization. So the perception process will be affected through this motives. So in this situation, personal insecurity leads to judge an individual or to find mistakes in their action. So that is motive. So next one, self-concept. So individual self-concept, a positive self-concept influence to perceive all the object in a positive way, to find out the good thing or to react in a positive way, to perceive all the things in a positive way. So negative self-concept leads to find out only the mistakes or to perceive in a negative way. So different situation or the different object you will perceive in only in a negative way with a negative self-concept. Positive self-concept leads to perceive all the object or all the situation in a positive way. So next one is interest. The perceiver interest will influence on the perception process. So if you are interested in particular object or in particular activity, you will perceive the object, you will perceive the thing in a positive way or you will perceive in a right way. So if you are not interested, for example, the students, if you are not interested in a particular subject or in particular class, you won't give attention for the classes. There, you won't receive anything from the teacher or from that particular class. So in a similar way, if you are interested in that particular subject or in class, so you will receive or you will perceive all the object or you will perceive all the information in a right way. So that is perception. So next one, expectations. So individual expectation, perceiver expectation will lead to perceive in a different way. For example, an interviewer expectation will lead to perceive the object or to perceive the candidate in different way. He expects experience as well as their qualification and their skills. So it influence on perceiving the applicants. So it influence on the selection process. So these all are the characteristics of perceiver. So all these characteristics will influence on the perception process. So that is first thing, characteristics of perceiver. So next one is characteristics of target. or object. So under that, motion, sound, size and background. So physical appearance of an target will influence on the perception process. So the physical appearance, like extremely attractive or unattractive individual, is likely to be noticed in the organization. So compared to normal individual, so either extremely attractive or unattractive individual will likely to notice in the organization. In a similar way, when it comes to individual, so that physical appearance will influence. So that is target. The object will influence. So that is individual will influence on the perception. So when it comes to object or the things, so the sound or the size of the object will influence on the perception. So based on the size, it influence on the perception. Then background, sound and motion, all this factor will influence on the perception. So if it is for the individual, the physical appearance. So if it is for the object, sound, size and background and motion will influence on the individual perception. So the individual may perceive in a different way based on the size, background and motion and sound. So again, in a similar way with a physical appearance. So they may perceive in a different way. So that is related to target or object. So based on the object, the perception may be differ from individual to individual. So next one, characteristics of situation. So in which situation this perception will happen. So it will influence on the perception process. For example, if your manager wants to meet you, so if an individual or the employee meets the manager in his office, so the situation is different. So individual, he may think that he perceive, so it is related to work. So now he is going to communicate with me for this working environment or for the process of this organization. So only it is related to business. So if the manager wants to meet you in the outside or external environment like any cafeteria or any other place apart from the office, so you may think that it is related to personal things or personal opinion. So the situation may be differ. So the situation will influence on the perception. So it influence on the perceiver mindset. You will prepare and go only if you are going to meet your manager in the office. So if it is in the outside, that is hotel or cafeteria, so your mindset is different. So depends on the situation, it influence. The perception is influenced by the situation, like time. So if you are meeting your manager in the evening, so that means, so you are going to meet him for any party or anything like that. So if it is in a working hours, so it is related to work. So next one, work settings, then social settings. So all this will influence on the perceiver or the perception process. So mainly the situation, then the object and the perceiver mindset will influence on the perception. So these all are the characteristics of perception as well as the factors which influence the perception process. So these all are the characteristics and factors influencing perception. Moving further, what all are the barriers for perception? So under that, first one is a selective perception. Under selective perception, we will receive the vast information. So we will get the lot of information so that we cannot concentrate on each and every information. For example, in the organization, the same situation or the same mistake has been done by various employees. But sometimes, so only once we are going to react, only once the manager or top management is going to react for that mistakes. So that means, so you are not going to give importance for the same mistake again, or previously we are going to ignore that mistakes. So now you are going to react for that mistake. So that is selective perception. So collectively you are going to react once for that one mistake. You cannot give importance for only one mistake or only one situation every time, because you will get the lot of information within the organization. So you need to concentrate on all the information so that only on the selective opinion or selective situation you are going to react. So it is a barrier for the perception. For example, 100 of employees are done the same mistake, But once you are going to react only on one individual, so that it will affect on the perception process. So that is selective perception. So next one, stereotype. Stereotype is, so every individual in the organization is belong to one or the other group. Either it may be a formal or informal group. So now the manager is going to generalize the whole group. That means, so by only one characteristics or only one feature, you are going to generalize all the individual. You are not going to analyze as an individual. You are going to generalize all the characteristics or all the behavior of an individual as a group. For example, one mistake or any one mistake done by one individual, you are going to generalize and give opinion for whole group, not as an individual. So in a similar way, for the appreciation. So if they have done the good work, you are going to appreciate the whole group, not an individual. College. So if you are belongs to group which is very regular to the classes, so that then we are going to generalize whole group, not an individual. If you belongs to one particular group, irregular to the classes. So if an individual is regular to the class, we are going to generalize that group and you belongs to that group, so that you're going to consider as a group, not an individual. So that is stereotype. So next one, halo effect. So halo effect or halo error, it refers to based on one special characteristics or feature, you're going to generalize all the individual characteristics or feature. So based on individual one feature, you're going to generalize or you're going to judge an individual. For example, if an individual is good at singing, means, so you are going to interpret and you are going to judge the individual as she is a good competitor or she is a good individual. She may not be good at studies. She may be not good at any other work. So she is only good at singing. So only one feature or one behavior we are going to generalize, we are going to judge an individual behavior. In a similar way, in the organization, so attractive individual personal assistant through her physical appearance and one of the qualities like her presentation. So using that quality, you are going to judge her. But she may be a poor typist. So you, based on one characteristics, based on one feature, you are going to judge an individual. So that is halo effect. So next one is first impression error. So this you all know. So first impression will last for the longer period. So it is difficult for an individual to change his first impression. So based on the first impression, you are going to react or you are going to perceive all the information. So the positive impression will lead to perceive all the information in a positive way. So the negative impression will lead to receive all the information in a negative way. So only the first impression will influence for a long period. So last one is projection. How you will project yourself will influence on the perception process. So that is projection. All these are the barriers for perception. So moving further, principles of perceptual organization. So in perceptual process, we select a particular stimulus with our attention and interpret it. So in the same way, whenever it is necessary, many discrete stimuli in our visual field are organized into a form and perceived more meaningfully than any appearance. So based on your stimuli, you are going to interpret that situation or object and we are going to give meaning for that object or appearance. So it is classified into two types, figure-ground relationship and grouping of stimuli. So first one is a figure-ground relationship. So figure-ground relationship means if you consider one situation, there is one background for that situation. So you cannot separate the background from the situation or the object. So the object and the situation is linked together. So you cannot separate both the situation as well as the object. So you need to perceive both the background as well as the object here. So for example, if you consider these two objects, so if you just look at the first object, so first you can find out two faces here, but there is a background. So this white background. So the image or the structure is a background. So you cannot separate the image and the background. That is the object and the background. So you cannot separate the situation, that is object and the background, under the figure ground relationship. So there is a relationship between both the object and situation. You need to perceive object and the situation similar way. So now here again you have a object like black image. It is an object. Again two faces. This white color is two faces. So again you cannot separate the object and the situation. So that is background and the object and situation. So you need to perceive both the object and situation as well as the background simultaneously. So that is figure ground relationship. So in any situation you cannot separate the situation as well as the background. So it influences on the perception process. So that is figure ground relationship. Next one is grouping of stimuli. So based on your stimuli, you are going to perceive the things. So it is further classified into 5 types. So first one is proximity. So under proximity, this similar object are grouped together. For example, so here the object are similar but the number of objects are different, but the similar objects are grouped together. So for this group we can call the group of stars. So here the object, the similar object are grouped together but it is not same. So here we have 5, 1, 3, 2. It is not same in number but the similar object is grouped together. That means, so the similar stimuli, desires, we can form a group. With the similar stimuli or the desires, we can form a group and we can give meaning for that particular group. That is proximity. So next one is similarity. So here there should be some similarity in stimuli in order to perceive something. For example, so here all these are the shapes. So it has some similarity. That means all this belongs to shapes. So similar object or the similarity in the perception, similarity in the desire or the stimuli group together and give meaning for that group. For this we call it as a group of stars. For this we call it as a group of shapes. So we give a meaning with the similar stimuli. So we find similar stimuli here. So here the same object is grouped together. Here similar object is grouped together. So next one is continuity. For continuity, so for this, if you observe this diagram, so you will say that this line will continues. This. But, so this is a 3 separate off circle. 3 separate off circle. But all the 3 separate off circle together, it forms like or it looks like the line continues. So that is continuity. So all the stimuli together we continues, or all the stimuli which is related to each other we group together and we form a continuity. So that is continuity. In a similar way, another example. So here, so it continues. So we give meaning through this continuity. So we connect all these stars to give meaning. That is continuity. So next one is closure. So closure means So now you can say what is this. So this is M. Visually we are going to continue or we are going to connect all this gap. So now visually, psychologically we are going to connect or we are going to make this image full. For example, this is, so it is not connected. Psychologically, visually we are going to connect this and we read it as a O. So that is closure. We give the closure meaning for particular object, that is perception. So next one is symmetry. So symmetry, so the different symbols together we call it as a bracket. For example, so all these are the arithmetical tools. So different types of brackets. So all together we call it as a group of brackets. So it's a flower bracket and it's a different brackets, but all together we call it as a group of brackets. That is symmetry. So in a similar way, while perceiving something, so we find out this proximity, similarity, continuity, closure and symmetry to perceive something or to give meaning for the environment or for the surrounding us. This is all about the principles of perceptual organization. The next one is managing perception. So the organization has to manage the individual perception. So the answer is absolutely yes. So the organization has to manage the individual perception in order to bring coordination and in order to achieve your objective. So how you can manage the perception? First one, how you think you are perceived. So when the manager or when the organization instruct their employees or the subordinates, first step is to find how you think you are perceived. First you need to identify whether the individual is perceived the instruction or not. So make sure that individual has perceived. First think whether they have perceived or not. So first confirm that. Next step, how they actually are perceived. For example, you say 1 plus 1 is equals to 2. So the instruction is 1 plus 1 is equals to 2. First step is to confirm that whether the perceiver perceived the information or not. So after that, next step is what actually they have perceived. By asking question, so you can clarify by communicating with individual, you can clarify that how actually the individual is perceived. For example, he may perceive that instruction as 1 into 1 is equals to 1. So he may perceive in this way. So the instruction is this, but the perceiver perceive the information like this. Next step, how you want to be perceived. So next, decide how you want to be perceived. That means the actual information. So what the instruction the organization has given. So decide. So this is the actual information or you want to perceive the instruction like this. So next, decide how the perceiver should perceive the information. So decide this. So next, how you change the perception. So now you know how the perceiver perceive the information and how you want to be perceived. So next, you decide how to change. So now just rectify the error and again give the instruction like 1 plus 1 is equals to 2. Again give the instruction like this. So now you can manage the perception. So in a similar way in the organization, in order to make decision, in order to give instruction, you need to manage the individual perception so that it helps to bring all the individual to the right path or to one single path so that you can achieve your objective. So first you need to confirm whether they have perceived the information or not. Next, how they have actually perceived the information. Then how you want to perceive the information. Then change the perception or change the instruction. So these are the steps to manage the perception. So through this, organization can achieve the objective easily, so that there is a unity in command, so that it helps to build a coordination among the employees so that you can achieve your objective easily. So these all are the steps to manage the perception. So for this session, we finished with the perception. In the next session, let us take the emotion. So what do you mean by emotion? How the organization has to manage the emotion, kinds of emotion. So all this we can discuss in the next class. Until then, keep watching. Thank you.